Oh, that's how we know it's official when we hear that recording in progress. All right, guys, welcome to this week's Legends of Be Wealthy. We are super excited to have one of our newest mastermind members, Jake Breen, on the call with us. Hi, Jake.
Hey, how are you?
Doing awesome, thank you. So I know a little bit about your background, but we were super excited to have you on today because your background and what you currently are working on is a little bit different than some of our other mastermind members.
Sure.
So everyone in the Be Wealthy Mastermind has an operating business in the real estate space. However, that operating business can be a retail real estate team, a lender, an insurance company, a brokerage owner. There's a lot of different operating businesses that we utilize in the business management component to then feed through to create long-term generational wealth. And so you have been an incredible business owner in several different capacities inside the industry. And so I'm excited for everyone to dive in and get to know a little bit more about you. So what market are you in? Let's start there.
Salt Lake City, Utah, and really kind of cross all the borders and counties and sell in all of Utah and remain kind of market experts. Some of our ancillary business services, like our construction company, goes all the way down to southern Utah, St. George area. So really the state of Utah.
Wow, that's incredible. So tell us, first of all, you guys have had quite the growth opportunity in Salt Lake City, a lot of changes in the past several years. So tell us about your current businesses as they sit today, what different ancillary lines you have and what that currently looks like.
Yeah, you got it. Really brief 50,000 foot overview. As I started in real estate 20 years ago, was attempting to go to law school, hated it, didn't want to wait till my 40s or late 30s to make a partner and kind of go that route. And also had some things in my personal life that occurred, divorce of my parents, some things. So I kind of found myself couch surfing at 22 years old and sleeping at friends and thought, I got to make money now. And so that was the launching board into real estate. A couple of years later, I had some sales, teamed up with somebody. We had some decent success doing some flips. And then I went to a more legitimate established brokerage. It was Prudential at the time. And then as that progressed, I became the broker of Sotheby's when that brand came to Utah. So really kind of got into luxury. And then when Prudential sold to Berkshire Hathaway and they announced they were opening up a corporate office in Salt Lake City, I became the broker of that. And so I kind of really rose the residential ranks and just kind of was your typical producing realtor with a team. We had a few unique things. We were early to the team thing, probably 17 years ago. And so being a team back then was unique. We were kind of the first group in our marketplace to use a logo everywhere to advertise our team versus the typical like realtor way, which is, the Jake Breen team with my face on a bus. We never did stuff like that. Okay. Now everybody does it, but we were kind of mavericks in that sense. So while I was kind of going, let's say, up the corporate ladder of real estate, I became a public speaker for Berkshire Hathaway, so around the country and spoke for them. And that also led to some mentoring and training. We started an AMP program inside them. I ran Berkshire Hathaway's Rethink Council nationally, which was the top millennial producers under the age of 35 in the network globally. Did that for them for 2 years. And then about a year ago, stopped all that and went out on our own on the brokerage side. So we opened our own boutique here in Salt Lake City. But also during that kind of last decade of growth in the corporate career, we started opening a lot of other little ancillary services that fed our sales team. So it wasn't just we were leaving the corporate brokerage world to open our own boutique. It was more that we were spending so much time in our ancillary businesses and they had nothing to do with Berkshire Hathaway. And so it just got a little interesting that we would sell a transaction, but then had all these other arms in our other businesses that profited from that. So we ultimately decided to step out on our own. Last thing I'll say is those arms today are, we do have a insurance arm that my partner Josh Metal and I started. We've got on the investment side, we've got all asset classes, I guess I should say. We have some land deals we're doing. We've got 9 commercial buildings. Most of them are medical office, but we've got some retail mixed in there. We've got multifamily. We've done low-end multifamily, just kind of, buying in the areas that are being regentrified and keeping costs as cheap as we can and rents as cheap as we can. And then we've got some really cool mixed use, high-end downtown Salt Lake loft apartment type things that we're kind of cutting edge on, and also trying to do furnished midterm rentals and things like that. We've owned a decent amount of nightly rental and vacation properties, ski in, ski out properties in Utah. So we've kind of got that investment arm. And my role there is really analytics and still being the realtor, deciding what we purchase. And that's typically how I get ownership in the deal, rolling in commissions and whatnot. And then we have a construction company here that my brother runs, primary residential custom there. We've done a few small subdivisions and things like that. And then we have a software called Digit, DIJJIT.com. And I won't dive too much into that, but the genesis of Digit was, as I managed both Sotheby's and Berkshire Hathaway, I saw kind of the archaic way that the big brands still give referrals to agents, and how they use these middlemen, third-party referral systems. The largest one today is probably still Cardis. Most major brands use them. Cardis will go to, say, an American Express and say, you're moving 300 employees to a different state or opening a corporate headquarters, and they'll arrange to move all those people. And then Cardis will arrange, let's say, truck moving services, pet care, hotel stays, and get discounts on all those things. And then ultimately arrange what brokerage is going to assist those people. And I was a part of that for a good almost 20 years with these brands. And we started selling a lot of doctors and physicians. My team was the preferred group, the University of Utah Medical and IHC here in Salt Lake, which are the biggest hospital networks. And we were working with a lot of doctors and physicians. And then my partner on our investment side, Josh Metal, over the last decade, got into all 50 states with his physician loan financing. And he's actually the #1 independent financer outside of Wells Fargo of doctors and physicians in the US. So with all that, I went, there's got to be a better way and a faster way nowadays to move people than this kind of archaic way. So we created software that kind of immediately connects consumers when they find out they're moving across state lines, don't have a realtor, don't have a lender. And the software connects directly with lenders' CRMs, so they can click a button while they're filling out a loan app with the consumer and ask one question: are you working with a realtor, or have you signed a buyer broker? And then we can introduce the realtor. Our motto is, at the right time, the moment that the customer's mind is saying, I'm filling out a loan app, I'm interested in talking real estate, versus the Zillow way and all the other lead gen ways, which is, let's grab your contact info and then hound the crap out of the consumer until somebody solicits them hard enough that they finally go, fine, I'll show me houses.
Hear me out. Yeah.
So that's, I think that covers it all.
I have a million questions, so I'm glad we have some time together. And for those of you who are watching live on Facebook or here in the Zoom room, if you have questions as well, go ahead and put them in the chat box, or on Facebook, I think it's below, and Cindy will move them over to the chat here for us. So first, I think there's so much to dive into here, because you've really mastered the monetization of the real estate transaction. You've looked at it from the lead generation standpoint, all the way at the software, all the way down to insurance and construction on the back end. So when you look at the life cycle that exists in a real estate transaction, man, you're looking at it from end to end, which I think is really impressive. Most of those in our industry stick in one lane and maybe dabble into title or mortgage or insurance. You've really spread the entire gamut. So how did that happen? Was that because of some of your corporate experience in the past, or how did you really look at it from that angle?
Yeah, I would say I kind of had an aha moment. I think it was my late 20s or early 30s. And I was kind of, oh gosh, how do you say it diplomatically? Going to these annual realtor conferences with these big brands and getting announced up on stage that we were, winners of this many units or this much GCI. And I was kind of priding myself on #1 team and all these things, the way a lot of the big brokerages motivate their sales force, right? And I was selling that too, and starting to do that for them. And I'm not speaking negatively towards that, but I went, gosh, as I started doing a few other ancillary businesses, I went, I'd rather have this kind of quiet, nobody knows passive income that comes to me with less effort. Because as we all know, representing one client, let's say on a transaction that gets tough, especially on the buy side, can be a lot of time for that money. So that aha moment, I went, all right, I've done this for enough years that I don't really care about the limelight anymore. And I would like to grab other parts of the transaction. What's going to be the lowest hanging fruit, the least amount of time for the greatest gain? And also, I had a decent amount of moments, and I'm sure there's other business owners and entrepreneurs that often feel this way, where I felt rather comfortable with my personal finances and safe. I didn't have any hookups or family or anything getting started. As I mentioned, the couch surfing. So that motivated me my first decade. But then I hit these kind of goals I always thought I'd want to achieve kind of early, by like 30 years old. And I went, nothing changed. Yeah. And so my motivation became more just, man, I gotta keep feeding this and have other opportunities so I can keep my team busy and keep everybody providing for their families. So I kind of shifted, and that we could talk this whole time about that. That was a difficult shift. And there's a whole nother one, I believe, for a lot of people at that 40 years old and midlife crisis. Anyways, so it was really a mindset, Caitlin, at first that had me going, all right. And I'll tell you the goal I set for that mindset. The goal was pretty simple. And I don't know, I'm kind of weird. I didn't write it down. It wasn't like whiteboarded out, but I just kind of thought about it a lot in my mind. And that goal was, all right, I've done X with my efforts, which is all sales. Like I've made this much money, and I'm pretty sure with the systems we have set up, I can maintain that and or grow that yearly. It's kind of working. I want to match that at least, or get past that in passive income. And of course, everybody wants that. And most real estate folk just go, I have to buy X amount of properties and they need to cash flow this much. And then, well, yeah, that's what Rich Dad, Poor Dad says. But in reality, that's a lot harder to do than what the books say these days. But we could talk interest rates and all the other things, but, and all of us in the industry get people saying, I read this book, I really don't have any capital right now, but I want to use other people's money. I'm not saying you can't do that, but it gets really hard to cash flow a deal. So when I started doing that and I had a few rentals and stuff, I went, wow, this is going to take too long as well. So it was about a 5-year period where I was able to really take whatever was the lowest hanging fruit, look at a transaction and go, well, gosh, we did 100 deals this year. We paid our insurance company this much or gave them this many referrals. Gosh, we love our home inspector, but he did 70 buy sides for us. And, we made him 40 grand. And I got a buddy who's a handyman that could do this and I could absorb him into us. And once you stabilize your business, let's say you own your building, you have a physical location, your team's X amount of size, it's very easy to pull in these little arms and put people to work. And so it was about a 5-year period. And in that 5-year period, I was able to get our investments, our properties, and our other ancillary businesses bringing me, I wouldn't say it was truly passive, but pretty passive income that equaled or surpassed my commissioned income. And that's maintained for the last 8 or 9 years and superseded it. And then the ending of that story is I felt a little bit sheepish when I went up on stage still at these national conferences and my team slid from like first place, which we had achieved a few times for the Utah market, to second or third. And my team was like, wah, wah, we were third. And I'm sitting there going, dude, if we put up all of our other ancillary businesses and stuff in there, and I know these other teams, and they don't even have one investment. They have no strategy on that side. So I believe what rules the roost, if you're going to be in real estate or you're licensed in sales, I truly believe that's the launching board. You got to start in sales if you have no capital and whatnot. And it's the quickest money for the effort. But then you've got to start diving in. You got to put your money where your mouth is. If you're telling your clientele, do this, and here's how to invest, and I became an expert at this, and then you don't own any multifamily, they're not going to find you believable. I'll say one more thing about that. I am, and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but I kind of believe myself to be one of the only long-term residential careered realtors in Utah that has deep, trustworthy relationships with a lot of the top commercial brokers.
Okay.
And I get asked that all the time, like, how did you break in that market? And it was what I just said about putting your money where your mouth is. My partners and I started owning some commercial and figured it out. And instead of reading books, we kind of just did it. We definitely had some errors that we made and pitfalls. But once I did it for myself, it was very easy to tell clientele how I did it. And fast forward to today, as far as commission income goes, my team still does a decent amount of residential, and we call that our bread and butter money. If that comes in, we're still very focused on that. But I myself rarely show houses or anything. And I'll do, the last 7 or 8 years in a row, I've done at least 7 million in volume on commercial, up to 25 million annually, just on the commercial side. Being still, if you look at me online, everything kind of leads to he's a residential guy.
Sure. Yeah. I'd like to take a step back for a second, because I think there's some nuggets we can really, really learn from there.
Sure.
You talked about you were working with some large corporations and you had a corporate job.
Mm-hmm.
While you had a corporate job, which was the brokerage position, public speaking, leading the organization locally in Salt Lake City, you also had your team.
Yeah.
How did you manage that? How did you manage running two basically operating businesses or having two jobs?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us in this group, we've mastered that learn your craft stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't need someone to tell us how to win a listing. But now, as we're trying to grow some additional business lines, whether they're ancillaries or whether it's to start going down that investment route, that balance, that pendulum swing until there's enough success,
Mm-hmm.
can be very, very challenging. So how did you master that? How did
You're good at what you do. That's a great question. And I've done a lot of interviews like this. Nobody's ever asked me that. And it's
the hardest.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I would answer that this way. When I was the very first position I got that was W-2'd income, because I was only used to 1099 commission income, it was my late 20s, and Scott Weber bought the rights to own the Sotheby's brand in Utah and Colorado. And kind of his best buddy office next to me at Prudential. And he came to him and they said, we need 2 people, one guy in Park City, one guy in Salt Lake. And that's how I ended up leaving Prudential and going to open and manage Sotheby's brand as it came here. And the biggest concern of everybody at the moment was, as the managing broker, are you still going to be able to run your team and sell? Because you're competing with the realtors you're managing. And this was probably 2008, 9, something like that. So back then it was still more taboo to do that. Like, it was very rare that a managing broker or a broker owner competed against their agents. And so everybody was concerned about it. And as Thomas went to run Park City and I went to run Salt Lake, both of us were still young and like, no, we have to keep, we're not going to hang up our 1099 side to get, $100,000 on the W-2 side and just go for management the rest of our lives. And Scott Weber was smart. He wanted people that like on the streets, we say, like still in the industry selling, also advising the agents we were recruiting. But instead of just starting from scratch here, he bought a boutique brokerage called Lewis, Wilcott and Dornbush. And that brokerage was chock full of the atypical realtor at the time, single producers, average age per NAR stats, like mid 50s. And they were very concerned about it. It took, I would say, at least 3 months to earn people's respect and for them to realize that I was coming from a space of, I will absolutely help you and not compete with you, but I'm still running my arm. Mm-hmm. So now there's an example to more directly answer your question. To straddle the fence, to live in both worlds, let's say, I believe there's a lot of ways to do it. Okay, there's ways you can do it, but I believe most of them lead to burnout or lead to problems. And I only know that because I chased a lot of these rabbits and I had quite a bit of burnout and say midlife crisis scenarios that really got me down, even though financially I was having success. Looking back on all that, and this is a decent amount personal and some spiritual trauma and learning to meditate and all these things. Looking back, I would say, if you've already got that one channel going, to straddle the fence on something else, you've got to find what's called your MTP. What's your massive transformative purpose? You have to look inside and go, what am I really good at? And it's not defining it as selling real estate. Okay, you're good at selling real estate, but why? I've met thousands of agents that are really good at selling real estate, but there's a different, really unique reason they're really good with their clientele. For me, I would say the number one aspect is that I have a knack for taking the complicated and making it simple. So I'm constantly, and the more complicated the transaction, so I've been able to step into this commercial world, is because I can read financials and pro formas. I do have personal investment experience. So it's pretty easy to talk to my spine surgeon doctor buddy that is closing on a commercial building for 2.7 million tomorrow. And he trusts me to sell him that transaction. So once you've done that, once you've kind of self-analyzed and gone, I'm good at this, it becomes really easy to spin up the next thing. The only next step after you know what your skill set is and you have a purpose and you're stoked about it is to go, okay, how could that also be used in tandem with what I'm already doing? Okay. And that's that actually, once you've defined insight, that actually becomes pretty simple. You can look at it transactionally and go, okay, I am uniquely good at XYZ. My clientele know me for this. And I'm already providing this much revenue or this much transaction volume in this other area. And that also fits my skill set. I could spin that up. Now, that's a more philosophical way. The way most people do this is, I'm doing this much volume. There's title, lending, whatever. I'm going to go to my title guy and say, you know, I want X percentage, or I'm doing enough volume with my team that we're going to spin up our own title. Absolutely, you can do that. And I'm not knocking that at all. That's the path most go. But what I've experienced with top producers that do that is they get spread too thin, their production goes down, and then they're taking their commission money and trying to keep the other business alive. And it's because they jumped into something that they thought they could just feed with production, but it didn't fit their skill set. And then it's a burning fire.
Yep. You're 100% correct. And I think that the evaluating of opportunities and really understanding, you know, you either have, we talk about the 3 resources, right? It's time, money, and influence. Really understanding what you are able to offer to each opportunity and your expected results in that opportunity, I think, are really important to know on the front end.
Absolutely.
Well, that being said, I'd love to go a little bit deeper in that. You've had a lot of opportunities that were brought to you, right? You have a naturally, I mean, it's obvious if you've been on here for 25 minutes, everyone in this room knows this. You're wildly intelligent, you're charismatic, and you connect well with people. And so it's no wonder opportunities constantly are coming to you, right? Whether you're the one stirring them up or other people are bringing them to you.
You're being too nice, but yeah, thank you.
I think everyone here would agree. So, how are you determining, let's start just operating business-wise, because I think this is interesting. In the investment partnerships you have, you're the analytics guy. You're the guy who's looking at it saying, red light, green light, this cash flows the way we want to.
Yep.
And I want to dive into what your red light and green lights are.
Yeah.
However, before we get there on the operating business side, the businesses like your software company, or even some of the speaking opportunities you've had, what is your decision metric, or what are you looking at to determine whether to do something or not do something? How do you determine that? Because I'm sure you're pummeled with opportunities and also your own ideas.
Yeah, that's a good question too. I am pretty unique, and I go against what is in a lot of the books I read. I read a lot of like nonfiction, self-help type stuff. If I showed you what's on my Audible, I mean, I go through probably a book a week, 4 or 5 a month. And I give myself a decent amount of pressure and guilt, because I'm like, I don't really do it that way. I am quite analytical when it comes to deals and spreadsheets and building out my own stuff in Excel. And I do, and mind you, I'm the minority investor in a lot of our buildings, and my other partners are majority. Yet they all go, Jake, are we doing this or not? But when it comes to, and sure, I use a lot of systems. I'm very systematized in my head and in my business. But when it comes to my personal calendar, my schedule, I don't use Calendarly. I'm pretty famous for my voicemail, if you were to call my cell phone, and I haven't changed it in probably 13 years. And it's quite facetious. It says something to the effect of, hi, you called me. I'm sure you know who you called. You're going to get me faster in text. A lot of people are doing this these days, but I was an early adopter when it was offensive to be like, text me, don't call me. And if you can't condense what you need from me into a short text, something like, you're going to have a hard time working with me. It's offensive. It's offensive. Like, and I've been told by, sorry, I got to say it, by a lot of boomers that like, dude, but then I have some super loyal clientele. They're like, oh, that's just him. And I've taught around the country. One of my most famous speeches is called Dear Boomer, Please Communicate. And in that, I dive into all these communication habits, and I have Harvard stats and all this that show like, all right, look, if you want to argue this point with me, when did billion-dollar cell phone companies switch from selling us voice data per minute to data? Now all cell phone plans are data. In fact, now they're all just unlimited, but they switched in 1999 from selling us minutes to, so why did these billion-dollar companies do that? Because data became the more preferred way to communicate, DMs, text, or whatever. And I'm not saying, so today we've got to be chameleons and decide which form best fits the situation. So anyways, I kind of believe that it boils down to how you can do the most with your time. How can you be the most efficient? And most humans, especially salespeople, good salespeople, tend to, if you do like a Myers test or a personality profile test, they tend to have similar traits, and those traits have them wanting to talk at people, to sell them. For those realtors on this call, for me, this is most common with the other realtor on the other side of the transaction that I just went under contract on, especially if it's their first and only deal. They want to talk to me like every day about it. And they think they're being a good steward for their client in doing so. Now, I will come off as short and stern, but fair when you first go under contract with me. And if something warrants a phone call, like a crisis moment, I'll absolutely do that. But I start training even new people that are communicating with me very quickly that like, hey, I operate Swift. And I know it might bug you a bit, But by the time we're done, you're going to see that I am still hyper responsive, or my team is hyper responsive, but we're not going to like small chat with you every day. Like, sorry. But if I'm having dinner with my folks this Sunday, yeah, I'll small chat with them. I love them, and my parents, and my family. So,
Yeah.
so I know that's a long way to answer your question, but I've kind of bucked the trend, and I don't want my schedule open on Calendarly at X amount of hours where I time block and anybody can just sign up for 15 minutes with me. I don't want to answer my cell phone. I know that's unique and disruptive, but I don't want to look at it. If I'm talking to somebody live at lunch, I have not answered my phone in a decade for that. And it's even come down to some moments that my wife's frustrated, and I'm not trying to be cocky, but that's the only way I'm able to say yes to more opportunities. And really, Caitlin, the answer to your question is still up to this point in my career, I say yes to almost anything that comes my way that is, even if it's philanthropic, if it fits my skill set. I'm not saying I say yes to everything, but if it fits my skill set, I get asked to speak at local universities here or there. I've been involved with local private college, Westminster. I ran their AMP program for 6 years, kind of entrepreneurs getting their MBAs. I say yes. And even if it doesn't have a monetary tie, every single one of those opportunities has led to dollars. Not that I'm chasing dollars, but it leads to it. I would advise a new realtor to go out and just be a part of networking groups and helping where they can help and expanding their knowledge for free than telling them to do lead gen, buy leads, or cold call. Never done that.
Yeah.
Never had to.
You said that you say yes to anything that fits your skill set, and that, is your, what was the phrase you used? Your MTP.
Yeah.
Anything that fits within your MTP. When you do have to say no to something, how do you say no to something where it doesn't cause a negative effect? Because I have a feeling with your communication skills, you're pretty good at that.
I think that if you know what that skill set is, and what your purpose is and what you're good at, let's use an example to make this specific. Sure, you do real estate, so you might, if you're good at it in your local market, you might get asked to come teach about it or whatnot. And if it's generic, what I will typically do is say, okay, how long do you need me, and what specifically is this about, and who's the audience? If I get that much and I'm realizing that it doesn't fit what I'm good at, then it's really easy to let people down softly. And it's even easier if this type of ask and communication is going back and forth in text or email. Obviously, the number one tool for sales folk in the 80s, let's say boomer generation, was the cell phone. And so by nature, they're very good at the cell phone. I don't just mean they're good at using a cell phone. What I mean is they're really good at a call. Read 1980s boomer style sales books, and they're chock full of how to pressure somebody on the phone, how to commit them, Now, the reason they get pissed at millennials who don't answer their phone is because they want the opportunity to talk at them and pressure them. My father-in-law does this to me all the time. He will call me, I call it phone raping, like 7 times during the week, and he won't text me, refuses. And then we're backyard neighbors. Different subdivisions. The river separates us. We have a bridge, so my kids run back and forth. This is a real example. I use this.
This is so cool. Okay, I love it.
Okay. And finally, he'll like catch me over the fence or something, and he'll go, "Hey, you haven't been returning my calls." And I'll go, "Yeah, I know. Shoot me a text," because I know he needs something, And we're buddies, but we have like a decade-long battle going about this. And he'll say, "Oh, I just need your help to move the couch. We're getting a new couch." I'm like, "Cool." And I go over right at that moment and help him move the couch. And I go, "Jimbo, if you would have texted me on Monday and said, 'Can we move the couch tonight?' I would have said, 'Yeah, I'll be home at 7. Let's do it." Right? So my silly point in that example is if you can, if your persona, we all have personas now, you're being projected online and you may be a different person live, but however you're kind of personified, when someone's going to solicit you and ask something of you, they're going to make an assumption of who you are based on what they're seeing online. For me, if you really are trying to juggle all these balls, you want to kind of add to that persona that, hey, I'm efficient. Not in a cocky way, I'm busy, I'm untouchable, but hey, I'm really efficient. Yeah, obviously I'm difficult to get a hold of. Every person that's efficient is. And then people will conform to your preferred form of communication. Yeah, mine's text and email, but yours doesn't have to be. If it's the phone, that's great. Then if you're able to get people to conform to your form, then to answer your question, it becomes a lot easier to say yes or no. And for me, it's easy to decipher in an email chain. All right, we're 2 or 3 emails back and forth. Hey, that's not going to fit. I mean, everyone can make up an excuse as to why, but I could do this, this, or that. Then you don't burn any bridges. Then people are like, that guy responded, he was cool, but he can't come do this.
And he was kind. I liked your, and it rolled off your tongue. So I know you say this probably 12 times a day. You may find me short, stern, but fair.
Yeah.
And I like that expectation setting, but also being really confident in who you are. I think a lot of times we grow up in real estate and in this service industry. And so you can become bullwhipped into what does this person need? And you're constantly being the chameleon that's chasing, and then to flip that script and to, this isn't going to sound right, but it's a power shift that'll help your efficiencies.
Yeah, it is. Honestly, Caitlin, let me get a little more personal on that. On the sales side, I've had a partner that we split 50-50, our commission income on a handshake since 19 years ago. Now, obviously, he's not involved in a lot of the other ancillary businesses and not involved on the investment side. And we don't even office in our building together anymore. He's still my good buddy. But when it comes to a sell that him or I have, we still split that 50-50. And people find that really unique and interesting. And we've kind of gone different paths in our personal lives. And he epitomizes the typical top producing realtor. And I'm not knocking it, but it is his entire life. It consumes his life. Now, he loves it, so I'm happy for him. And I love it because it does financially benefit me too. And it's built our business. But his phone is ringing all the time. He's interrupted constantly nights and weekends. And I didn't want that. And I didn't want that quite a long time ago. I had to do that for like 7-8 years to get going. And then I pretty quickly was like, how can I outsource this? How can I put it through the team? And so we kind of started going these different philosophies. And the interesting thing is we've maintained about the same amount of production. If you want to reduce it just to like, cool, how much did you sell then? So both philosophies work. And yeah, I want to say this diplomatically. I've had a lot more free time. I mean, the last, since COVID, to be candid with everybody on the call, I've probably only put in a good 20 hours of efficient work during a week at my office. I am kind of on all the time. That's how the business is these days, but I'm on in swift 30 or 60 minute moments when I'm out of town. During COVID, we went for a few months and just stayed in Hawaii because school was canceled and the kids could do everything online, and we just kept extending. And I would even say doing that has increased my business. Like, you make more connections, you meet more people, you are enjoying life, your demeanor, your energy, all these things help in expanding that network in a natural way, not a forced way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Efficiency, kindness, and directness is a lot of the underlying tone that comes across in conversation. what is a day? So you said 20 hours in the office right now, but you do have stints of time where it's 30 minutes here, 60 minutes here. You have the ability to always be on. However, it's 20 hours in the office today. So if someone right now is sitting in their office and they're 60 to 80 hours a week and just absolutely running and gunning, and they look at you and say, oh my God, I would love to do his 5-year shift that he did. How do I get started? What advice do you have for them?
That's good. I would say, we could get all the way to, oh, you got to build that passive income portfolio, and everyone knows that. So let's talk first step.
Yeah.
First step is looking at what takes the most time in your day. For sure, for me, and I think for a lot of sales folk, it's what we just talked about. It's where are you, wasting time in communication.
That's fair.
And when it comes transactionally, I've found that a large majority of top realtors, if they're putting a decent amount of places under contract, they're now focused on the under contract portfolio, and the agent on the other side is consuming a lot of their time, whether they like it or not, but they believe they have to be responsive to that agent. So, it's like talking about the inspection, talking about lining this stuff up, and it's like all that can be efficiently done over text, email, CRM these days. And an assistant can do it for you. And if you are selling, if you have more than 3 or 4 under contracts at a time, it is beneath your time to be doing all that. And here's one thing I use a lot in speeches. You got to step back and define who's in the power position. If you're in a low inventory market and you have a listing, you're in the power position right out the gate. Once it goes under contract, you're still likely in the power position. If you are in the power position, you can be a little more firm about your communication and the time you have to dedicate this. And I'm often back to the stern but fair. Cool, great, we went under contract. Nice to meet you. Pass off to my assistant. You're not going to hear from me again, in a nice way, in an email template we already have made out. And it kind of says don't contact me anymore. Okay, so step one is just look at your day. And my guess is for most people still selling, most of your time is taken up by meetings and communication surrounding your transactions. And my further guess is you really don't need to be doing that. You need to be expanding your network. You need to be talking to people. You need to be looking at other opportunities. The second step after that is, all right, now I've identified what's taking the time. How do I outsource that? And outsourcing, gosh, these days, it can be systems, it can be AI, it can be making that first hire. Side note on that first hire, I've also got asked this over 100 times in my career, and I do buck the trend big time. I have no agent agreements. I have no contracts, employment contracts. Everything's on a handshake with all my people. And now I told you that, you're not going to believe this. Everybody is percentage performance-based paid on commissions. Everybody, including my assistant.
What?
Yeah. So we just kind of say, hey, we all sink or swim together. You like it here, it's working for you. Awesome. It doesn't, you can grab your computer and bounce today. And I don't know what it is with that philosophy. We pretty much always had people just stay. We figure it out. And if look, the way the world works, the way sales work is, even if you are being super efficient and whatnot, the market's going to dictate a decent amount of what your production is going to be. So market soft, we all go down. Well, in that scenario, the business owner is always like, oh no, what am I going to do? And how long do I feed the beast till the market comes back? That's how everyone runs their business. And I found that crazy. What I do in those scenarios is go, hey team, this is getting bad. It's bad for all of us. What can we do now to supplement the income we've lost? Okay, cool. Let's go buy a house together, remodel it and sell it. And we let people micro invest and do that with small amounts of money and all these things. So for 20 years, we've been always able to plug the dam regardless of the market and dive into something else. It also creates an environment of excitement and entrepreneurship, even among people that don't own the business, but can have a little bit of a say. And it's better for me because I get a bunch of opinions and we're able to kind of diversify and make a smart decision that people have buy-in on.
So you, first of all, I don't think there's anyone else in our room who has a similar structure with their team.
Yeah, that's weird. It's unique.
It is unique. The other thing that's unique are your partnerships. And when we look at even on the investment side for you, a lot of your partnerships are with people you've been with for a really, really long time, or you have long-standing relationships with.
Yeah.
How do you determine who to go into business with and who not to? Because you've said handshake deal about if it was a drinking game, everyone would be wasted right now.
Yeah.
Handshake. How do you?
I know what you're getting at. I know what
Yeah.
you're getting at.
How are we determining who to have these handshake deals with?
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. And oh boy, let's see. So I mentioned my commissioned sell partner, and I insinuated that for sure in any tight relationship over 20 years, you're gonna have some possible divorce talks and a bumpy road, right? We've had that for sure, yet the testimony is that we're still doing it. Let's take Josh Metal, for example, who's also in Be Wealthy Network, my good friend, and he is the primary investor and the guarantor on all the financing on all 9 of our commercial assets. That portfolio is probably valued at around 130 million at this point. And its leverage position is probably 55-57%. So it's done well. It's very healthy, and they're all deals we've kind of figured out together. And yes, the setup, the entity structures on all those is very official. We're very protected. But how did that originate? How did that relationship get figured out? Well, reverse back to early stages of my career, he was just a loan officer that solicited me. We were top producing realtors. He wasn't my buddy from high school. He didn't know me. He did a good job of that. He started doing a lot of our loans. We had a business divorce some odd years later because I had to use the preferred lender for some of these brands I was managing, and I couldn't go back to him. Then some odd years later, I was able to get him to be the preferred lender for Berkshire Hathaway, and he had that for 4 years till I left, and we killed that relationship. So we kind of just scratched each other's backs and then went, hey, you have a skill set and I have a skill set. Why don't we just invest together? Now, that's where that relationship stops financially. We don't own, I have no ownership in his mortgage company. Here at this building, we office together. He's over there. My team's over here. But there, and people confuse that all the time because of the stuff we do. They think we cross over there. We only cross over on the investment side. Then I have my other guy that's, on the commission sales side. So, and as far as partners, I don't have any sort of written agreement with Josh on how that goes down, nor do I with Spencer. And I have a few other smaller relationships like that. I have ownership in our custom home building company. My brother runs it. I trust him impeccably. He trusts me impeccably. We don't have a contract together. Right. All right. So how do I safeguard? Yeah. This is going to sound wild, and I know it goes against conventional business nature, but I kind of have this belief that if you're so worried about the structure and the person you're doing it with and protecting yourself, one, you're going to have paralysis by analysis. You're going to spend all this time trying to figure that out, and the deals and getting the business going is going to pass you by. Two, if you're feeling that much angst going into this, that's likely either one, you're kind of always doing this in your mind. So you need to self-check yourself first and go, all right, am I never taking action because I'm too worried about structure and liability? Or two, you should listen to your emotional and spiritual body with trying to contradict your mental mind and say, this is not somebody you should be doing this with. And it doesn't mean that that person's a bad person. It just means that the way you operate isn't going to align. So maybe back to your drinking game analogy here, Caitlin, I would say it boils down to I have a knack for people I trust, and it's not my 2 main partners or my 3 main, they're very different people. It doesn't mean I only trust a certain personality profile or somebody that has my type of moral beliefs. No, it's more like, all right, I've dabbled with this person transactionally in my real estate business. They're a producer, I'm a producer. I can tell we kind of align in our thinking, and I would trust them. One last thing I'll say about it. Let's say all my advice is wrong and you get pretty deep in with somebody, a decent amount of money, and then you're just constantly clashing. And those that wanted to contradict what I just said would say, well, if you have it all in writing, then like you can enforce this or that, or take them to the cleaners, or vice versa. My experience is, even if it goes bad, I'd rather not get super litigious. And usually the other side wouldn't if you have a 3, 4, 5, 10-year relationship. Just like in most marriages that go to divorce, at first people are saying, let's be civil. And then it's fuel that's thrown on that fire that gets attorneys involved. And so if you can be civil and reasonable about money, I actually think that's easier to do if there are no contracts. You kind of just say, all right, both of our pants are down. What do you want to do here? And I've had those things many a times, but it's a way easier conversation because both parties, especially folks that are like entrepreneurs and in business and type A, they're going to want to be like, well, I said this, well, I have this in writing. No, it's easier when you're both like, all right, it is what it is. How do you want to figure this out? And I have never had to go to personal litigious court over any of these structures. Absolutely. You do this much stuff in businesses. I've had enough legal days, but nothing personal in my career.
Wow. That speaks volumes for your, you brought up the word trustworthy a lot, even in how to get into the commercial side. The character and long-term reputational standing and the way you interact with people makes everyone comfortable on both sides. And so I think that speaks volumes to your character and your reputation.
I tell my team on that note, it's just called freebies. And even at this stage of my career, I do a lot of freebies. What are freebies to me? This morning at the gym, 2 different people approached me that have never used me for a transaction, but kind of know I do real estate. And one guy said, hey, I'm listing my house with my long-term college buddy, but I wanted to give you a heads up if you got a buyer before it hits the market next week. And I said, yeah, send me the photo tour. It's actually highly likely, because we're a low inventory market, that I can sell that before anyone sees it. And even if I don't, I can send that out to our clientele. And it's another boon for us going, my clientele goes, man, Jake's always finding out about stuff before it hits the market. So then you get followers. And the other thing, this other guy approached me and he was just like, hey, I'm thinking to get my license, but I'd only use it personally. And I'm looking at these 2 houses on realtor.com. And I said, yeah, dude, shoot me the links and I'll give you my opinion. And my team is criticizing me quite often. They tease me because they're like, dude, you show up and there's nothing on your calendar yet. Your whole day, you're super busy and multitasking. You should start saying no more. And you even alluded to that. Like, what do you say yes and no to? But my take is that we're getting more and more into a business world where that's not the case. You're either getting solicited hardcore because these tactics are like really coming at us in every single way on our phones, on our desktops, phone call. And so you're torn in all these directions and nobody gets personal mind space. Or somebody's super successful and they've shielded themselves from all that with all these systems. And the only way you get me is to schedule 15 minutes and here's where I'm available. My calendar's blocked out for a month. And there's kind of not this middle ground. Think of how it was for the entire evolution of business until about 10 years ago. There was a lot of middle ground. There was shut off time. There was like, I'm not available time. And it was considered totally normal, right? So I think when you can give the courtesy of a freebie and just kind of say, yeah, look, it fits my skill set. I'll answer your question real quick. You can really win people over, and you don't need to put it in realtor speak. I've also bucked the trend and never pushed for a buyer broker until I write the first offer for people. It's like, I don't need to have a sit down and put all these sales pressure tactics on them to get them to sign a buyer broker just to say, now I can hold you to a contract. No, my philosophy is, cool. At some point, if you don't want to work with me, I probably don't want to work with you anymore. There's probably some frustration or animosity, and let's just end this.
Sure.
You know?
I certainly agree with that. Brett and I call that the, well, he calls it, and now I do too, the good guy rule. Just be a good guy. And at the end of the day, it will work in your favor. You don't have to put too many barriers between yourself and the rest of the world in a way to protect yourself, which will end up hurting you in the long run. But you do have to have, you're a wildly disciplined human. You also have to have that side of it as well.
You do. And for me, it sounds silly, and I get teased about it a lot, but for me, a lot of that simply boils down to cell phone. You're new, you're wanting production, you're wanting connections, you're answering your phone, you're on all the time. If you're not answering, you're posting stuff on social, and all of a sudden your mind space is gone. You're with your family, but you're not really there because of what's on your mind. Totally. Then you have some success, and now all of a sudden you're trying to like build protections around you so that you don't have to be glued to that, but you've created habits that your business and production mindset owns you. And that's where people go, wow, I look back at my career and I did great. And then they're like, oh no, midlife crisis. All these other things are falling apart in my personal life. And again, I can speak to it because I dipped my toe in that water a lot and like towed that line and, went, yeah, for what? And it's, well, I think one of the hardest things to do in life is to change habits that you've ingrained that helped you be successful.
Sure. With that, that's a perfect transition. Brian Margolis asked us a couple of questions. So you had mentioned a few minutes ago about the email that goes out, right? Contract written, and then email goes out that you're under contract. He finds they still text him for everything. Inspections at 10 a.m. tomorrow, they'll text him at 7 or 8 the night before. How do you handle that when they just keep coming to you?
Yeah. My assistant will say this all the time. My business partner that is married to the business, works 70 or 80-hour weeks still. He says the same thing too. He's like, the way I build my relationship with my clients is being responsive. And guess what, Jake? Nobody reads your templated emails. My answer to that is, one, technology is always advancing and we have less and less mind space these days. And so you do have to consistently look at your templated emails that are supposed to relieve your time and make them smarter with the latest and greatest. For me, that is, if it's this long, hey, we're under contract, here's absolutely everything and your dates and what you need to do and where to send earnest money and your deadlines for everything, then people are just like, too much. I'll just text or call you. So, make it like this and say, we'll let you know next step, but for now, focus on this one thing. And then we insert super short, swift, personally filmed video links that say, if you don't want to even read this, just click this. And it's a 30-second, here's where to send earnest money, screenshot of the address, stuff like that. I also,
because we can implement that strategy. So thank you. That's a good takeaway.
Yeah. And lastly, I also do a decent amount of non-templated. Once you've done this long enough, you're trying to give your client that personal response, but you're also going, oh my gosh, I know what you're going to ask before you even ask it. And so to be professional about that, film a decent amount of YouTube videos that are like FAQs, have those hyperlinks. And then if you don't have somebody in contract and you're trying to win them over and they're learning your personality style, I'm famous for not answering and not really catering to their every whim, but going, hey, shoot me a text or an email. What are the 3 questions you had about the market? And then filming. I will schedule myself a Zoom meeting. I record the Zoom meeting to myself that I'm talking to myself, and then I send it to them. And those are usually between 3 and 6 minutes. And I'm interactive. I'll say, hey, your question was this. I got your email. Let me show you in the MLS how I'm searching for what you're looking for. This is how I like to do the bird's eye view and break it down. Here's what I think comps are. Dude, you do that. 1, I condensed my time. 2, they learned how I communicate. And 3, 99% of the time, people are like, whoa, that was bomb. And we were going to ask all those other questions and you already answered them. We're going with you. I do that for listing appointments. Sometimes I don't even see the property. I haven't met the person. they're own a second property. They're out of state. It's hard for us to arrange. I film a video instead of sending a CMA and a listing presentation. And they just see me live and I'm talking to them about the property and then say, this is how well I know the area. And the people are like, you're our guy. Cool.
Totally. All right. One more real quick question, because I know your time's super valuable.
Sure.
Brian just asked, do you do any vision or mission exercises? Do you have like a book or a podcast that can help him to really figure out? And I think he's kind of alluding to that MTP or what is your massive transformative purpose?
Yeah, I have a lot I could recommend. I've got a book reading list. Maybe we can post somewhere with where this recording's gonna be posted. But I would just tell you this to be swift. Peter Diamandis, the X Prize, Singularity University. He's founded $6 billion startups. I find him one of the most progressive minds. No, he doesn't talk about real estate. He does sometimes, but really he talks about progressive technologies and where the future is going. His latest book is, of course, on AI. But there are podcasts, books. He's constantly doing interviews with all the most famous podcasters. And if you're an entrepreneur in real estate or just an entrepreneur in general running your businesses, listen to anything by him, because really where you need to be focusing your mind is, how am I going to be disruptive and how is the industry and what I do daily going to be disrupted and changed in the next 6 to 12 months, guys? I'm telling you, once you learn about convergence, you think technology changed fast the last decade, you wait for the next 3 years. So anything by Peter Diamandis, it's Diamodis, I believe. Wonderful. And if I spelled that wrong, just Google Singularity University. That's one of his companies.
Amazing. I am personally going to do that. You gave selfishly. I always love doing these interviews with absolutely awesome entrepreneurs like you, because I learned so much. And I know everyone who is watching this and will be watching this learned an incredible amount from you as well. So thank you so much for being so transparent. We didn't even get into the questions that we thought we were going to.
That's all good. Typically interviews with me go that way.
Well, I appreciate you so much. And we will look forward to seeing you at the next mastermind. Thanks so much, Jake.
You got it. We'll see you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.